Fences were constructed to prevent damage. Signs were placed to educate, and aerial photography became the primary tool for documenting and studying these fragile relics. But even with these protections, the questions lingered. Who created these massive figures? Why were they placed here? And how did ancient people, with no aerial vantage point, create such perfect shapes, only visible from the sky? One of the most widespread theories points to indigenous ceremonial traditions involving circle dances, initiation rites, and mythological storytelling. The human figures may represent the Avaquame creator myth, or perhaps they served as landmarks along ancient trade routes that stretched across the American Southwest. Another theory suggests that the geoglyphs played a role in ritual pilgrimages, where groups of geoglyphs. They share similarities with other intaglio sites across the Colorado Desert, but the Blythe figures are by far the most impressive in size, number, and preservation. In this documentary, we will explore not just the carvings themselves, but the stories behind them, the theories, the myths, the scientific studies, and the cultural significance that continues to resonate today. The Blythe intaglios are not just ancient artwork. They are the fingerprints of a civilization we still struggle to fully understand. And their survival into modern times is a reminder of how fragile history can be and how powerful human creativity is, even in the most unforgiving environments. This is the mystery of the Blythe geoglyphs. And this is only the beginning. Giants in the desert, a mystery revealed. In the vast sun-scorched landscape of the lower Colorado River Valley, where the desert stretches out like an endless canvas of sand, stone, and shimmering heat, there exists a hidden masterpiece, larger than life, older than memory, and almost invisible to the human eye from the ground. These are the Blythe intaglio geoglyphs, enormous figures cut. The figures are all more than 1%, and the process continues. The story of the Blythe intaglios begins long before their rediscovery in modern times, before aerial flight gave humans new eyes to look upon the landscape. The desert in which they lie is ancient, shaped by millennia of shifting sands, receding riverbanks, and the footsteps of indigenous peoples who navigated this harsh and beautiful region for thousands of years. To understand the Blythe intaglios, one must first imagine a world where storytelling, religion, ceremony, and identity were expressed not with paper or stone tablets, but by shaping the land itself. The intaglios are enormous designs, some over 170 feet long, created by scraping away the dark, oxidized surface stones to reveal the lighter soil beneath. These designs include human forms, animal shapes, and geometric patterns, all created with astonishing precision. And the most remarkable part, they were meant to be viewed from above, centuries before humans had the ability to soar into the sky. But before we jump into theories about their creators and their purpose, let's rewind to the moment of their modern rediscovery, a moment that changed everything. It was the early 1930s. Aviation was still fresh, new, and thrilling. Pilots flew low over the desert for sport, exploration, and transport. One such pilot, navigating the rugged skies over the Colorado Desert, looked down and saw something unexpected. Embedded in the landscape were massive shapes, human-like, animal-like, etched into the earth like desert ghosts. The pilot circled back, trying to understand what he was seeing. The shapes were too large, too orderly, too intentional to be natural. He had stumbled upon something ancient. Word spread quickly, and soon archaeologists, anthropologists, and journalists were making their way to the site. What they found was astonishing. 6 enormous geoglyphs, 3 human figures, 2 four-legged animals, and a spiral-like geometric pattern, some stretching longer than a football field. They were perfectly proportioned, meticulously carved, and aligned with a level of precision that defied explanation. But even more intriguing was the mystery that surrounded them. No written records explained their origin. No surviving oral tradition definitively named their makers. There was no clear date stamped into the earth. They simply existed, enigmatic, silent, immense. Early researchers speculated that these designs belonged to the Native American peoples who lived in the region, particularly the Quechan and Mahav, tribes whose histories along the Colorado River stretch back thousands of years. And these communities were known for their rich ceremonial traditions, their oral histories, and their deep connection to the land and cosmos. Some researchers believe the figures might represent important mythological beings, such as Mastemho, the creator figure in Mojave cosmology, often depicted as a human-like entity shaping the world. But even this theory had gaps. Were the Blythe and Tagios ceremonial sites? Were they meant as offerings, maps, messages to the creator, astronomical markers? Or were they the sacred leftovers of rituals long faded into the sands of time? For centuries, the figures lay unnoticed, protected purely by isolation and the desert's harsh climate, until their modern rediscovery thrust them into public view. Suddenly, these ancient designs, once untouchable in their quiet desert home, faced new threats. Curiosity brought tourism, tourism brought vehicles, and vehicles brought destruction. By the mid-20th century, portions of the geoglyphs have been damaged by off-road driving, grazing cattle, and careless visitors. Recognizing the urgency of preservation, the US government stepped in. In 1952, the Blythe intaglios were designated a California historical landmark, later coming under the protection of the Bureau of Land Debt Management. Fences were constructed to prevent damage. Signs were placed to educate, and aerial photography became the primary tool for documenting and studying these fragile relics. But even with these protections, the questions lingered. Who created these massive figures? Why were they placed here? And how did ancient people, with no aerial vantage point, create such perfect shapes, only visible from the sky? One of the most widespread theories points to indigenous ceremonial traditions involving circle dances, initiation rites, and mythological storytelling. The human figures may represent the Avaquame creator myth, or perhaps they served as landmarks along ancient trade routes that stretched across the American Southwest. Another theory suggests that the geoglyphs played a role in ritual pilgrimages, where groups traveled from one sacred site to another to reenact cosmological stories. The great figures may have been markers, giant symbols meant for the spirits above rather than the humans below. Others believe the geoglyphs served as astronomical markers, aligned with solstices or seasonal events. But evidence for this remains inconclusive, and much of the intaglio's purpose is still steeped in speculation. What is certain, however, is that the Blythe intaglios remain one of North America's largest and most mysterious collections of geoglyphs. They share similarities with other intaglio sites across the Colorado Desert, but the Blythe figures are by far the most impressive in size, number, and preservation. In this documentary, we will explore not just the carvings themselves, but the stories behind them, the theories, the myths, the scientific studies, and the cultural significance that continues to resonate today. The Blythe intaglios are not just ancient artwork. They are the fingerprints of a civilization we still struggle to fully understand. And their survival into modern times is a reminder of how fragile history can be and how powerful human creativity is, even in the most unforgiving environments. This is the mystery of the Blythe geoglyphs. And this is only the beginning. Cans in the earth, how the Blythe intaglios were made. As the desert sun rises over the Colorado River basin, it casts long shadows across the Blythe intaglios, revealing forms so precise and deliberate that one cannot help but wonder, how were these enormous geoglyphs created? What methods were available to their ancient makers, and what motivated them to inscribe such large symbols onto the landscape? To answer these questions, we must first imagine the world as it existed many centuries ago. There were no machines, no metal tools, no aerial views from planes or drones. And yet, the creators of the Blythe intaglios managed to produce designs of astonishing scale and symmetry, using nothing but their knowledge of the land, simple hand tools, and a keen understanding of perspective and alignment. The technique behind the intaglios is known as intaglio scraping, a method practiced by various indigenous groups throughout the American Southwest. Unlike petroglyphs, which carve into rock, or pictographs, which apply paint to surfaces, intaglios are created by removing material, specifically the dark, desert-varnished stones that coat the surface of many arid landscapes. Beneath this hard, oxidized layer lies a much lighter soil. By scraping away the dark top layer, ancient artisans created a stark contrast that allowed the design to stand out clearly from above. Each line, each shape, each carefully carved curve is the result of deliberate effort. The human figures, for example, were made by clearing wide paths in the desert pavement, some as wide as several feet, to form outlines of limbs, torsos, and heads. The animal figures, such as the quadruped, required an even greater understanding of proportion, perspective, and spacing. These figures stretch across the ground like shadows of giants. But the remarkable precision of these forms raises a compelling question. How did the creators maintain scale and symmetry without an aerial perspective? One theory suggests that the geoglyphs were created by teams of people, each assigned to a specific part of the figure. These teams may have used long wooden stakes, woven fiber ropes, and simple geometric measurement systems to create straight lines and consistent shapes. The concept is similar to the way ancient builders created massive structures like earthen mounds, stone circles, or even the pyramids through organization, cooperation, and shared cultural knowledge. Researchers have also speculated that the creators may have stood on nearby hills or rock outcroppings to gain a partial aerial perspective. Although the bluff near the intaglios does not provide a perfect top-down view, it does offer a vantage point elevated enough to guide large-scale construction. Even a small increase in elevation can help an artist understand the overall shape of a ground drawing. Another point of fascination is the consistency of the figures. The largest human figure, for instance, measures approximately 171 feet long. Despite its massive size, the proportions of the limbs, torso, and head remain coherent and intentional. This consistency hints at a shared visual language among the creators, an understanding of how figures should look, whether for ritual, symbolic, or narrative purposes. The techniques used to maintain such consistency almost certainly involved repeated ceremonial or communal activity. Many archaeologists believe the geoglyphs were not constructed in a single day or even a single year, but rather maintained over generations. Wind, sand, and erosion would gradually fill in the lines, requiring regular upkeep. This suggests that the Blythe intaglios were not simply created and abandoned. They were active cultural sites, places where repeated ritual events kept the images alive, visible, and meaningful. To indigenous communities along the Colorado River, including the Mojave, Quechan, Kolkapa, and other groups. The landscape itself is a living storybook. Mountains, riverbanks, valleys, and deserts are imbued with spiritual meaning. The geoglyphs may have been part of this living landscape, a way to embed cosmological stories into the earth itself. One prominent theory connects the human figures to Master Mo, the Mojave creator deity. According to Mojave oral tradition, Master Mo was responsible for shaping the world, carving pathways, and guiding human beings. The outstretched limbs of the largest Blythe figure resemble depictions of Blythe Cain, Master Mo found in oral stories and surviving tribal artwork. If this interpretation is accurate, the intaglios may not merely be representations, they may be sacred storytelling tools, used during ceremonies to reenact the creation of the world. But these geoglyphs did not exist in isolation. Across the entire Colorado desert and into parts of Arizona, Nevada, and Baja California, similar intaglo figures can be found. Over 200 have been identified so far. These include human shapes, animal forms, spirals, circles, and long linear paths. Taken together, they form one of the largest collections of geoglyphs anywhere in North America. This widespread distribution raises another intriguing possibility, that geoglyphs served as markers along ancient pilgrimage routes. Indigenous groups are known to have traveled long distances for trade, ceremony, and social gatherings. The Colorado River was a major corridor of movement. The Blythe intaglios, situated near key river crossings and ancient trails, may have served as signposts or ceremonial destinations along these journeys. There is also evidence that the geoglyphs were connected to dance ceremonies. Some of the spiral and circular intaglios resemble the footprints of ritual dances still practiced by tribal communities today. In such ceremonies, participants move in coordinated circles for hours at a time, enacting stories, honoring deities, or seeking spiritual balance. These dances leave visible patterns in the ground. Patterns that, over time, could form the basis for permanent geoglyphs. The animal figures, including the quadruped, offer their own clues. Animals play central roles in indigenous cosmology, often serving as messengers, guides, or symbolic representations of clans and families. The quadruped figure may represent a mountain lion, a deer, or perhaps a mythological creature. Its precise identity remains debated, but its presence alongside the human figures suggests an interconnected narrative, a story told through shapes etched into the earth itself. The method used, scraping away dark stones, has another important effect. Once exposed, the lighter soil beneath reflects sunlight, especially at sunrise and sunset. Imagine a ritual performed at dawn, when the figures glow with soft light, their outlines sharp against the desert floor. It is easy to picture participants gathered around the designs, chanting, praying, or performing dances in alignment with the figures themselves. These rituals may have been intended not only for human eyes, but for the spirits above, watching from the sky. And this brings us to one of the most captivating interpretations of the Blythe intaglios, that they were created for sky beings, deities who observed the world from above. This idea is not unique to the Colorado Desert. Ancient cultures across the globe, from Peru's Nazca Lines to Australia's Maori Man, created enormous ground drawings that can only be fully understood from the air. While it is unlikely that the creators of the intaglios expected humans to view them from the sky, they may have believed that the spirits could see from above. In this context, the geoglyphs become offerings, messages, or venerated symbols meant to communicate with the divine. Yet, despite these many theories, questions remain. No one can say with absolute certainty how long it took to create the figures, how many people worked on them, or how often they were used in ceremonies. What we do know is that the geoglyphs were built with intention, care, and cultural meaning that endured through generations. Today, when we stand before the Blythe intaglios, we are standing on the threshold of ancient knowledge, knowledge that was not written in books, but written in the earth itself. The techniques used to create the figures reflect a deep understanding of the land, a refined sense of geometry, and a profound connection to spiritual and cultural identity. In the next chapter, we will explore how the modern world rediscovered these extraordinary figures, the challenges they faced in the years that followed, and the scientific investigations that continue to shed light on their origins. The Blythe intaglios were created by hands long gone, but their story is far from finished. Rediscovery, threats, and the fight to preserve the intaglios. For centuries, the Blythe intaglios lay largely hidden in plain sight, isolated in the vast stretches of the lower Colorado Desert. Though they had been created hundreds if not thousands of years ago, their sheer scale made them almost invisible from the ground. It was only with the advent of flight that humans were finally able to see the designs in their entirety, revealing the magnitude of a mystery that had long been buried in sand and shadow. The modern rediscovery of the Blythe intaglios came in the early 1930s, during a time when aviation was still an emerging technology. Pilots flying low over the desert, many of them exploring remote areas or transporting mail and passengers, were among the first to spot the enormous figures etched into the landscape. One pilot, in particular, noticed something extraordinary: a series of giant human-like and animal-like shapes stretching hundreds of feet across the desert floor. Circling above, he realized the full extent of these creations: carefully proportioned, monumental, and entirely intentional. They were unlike anything he had seen, and their size made it immediately clear that they could not be viewed from the ground alone. News of the discovery spread quickly through academic and aviation communities. Archaeologists, anthropologists, and journalists soon made their way to Blythe, California, hoping to document the ancient figures and uncover their origins. At first, research was slow and sporadic, hampered by the harsh desert environment and the lack of precise mapping technologies. Yet over time, researchers began to measure, photograph, and describe the geoglyphs, recognizing them as one of North America's most significant archaeological sites. In addition to the human and animal figures, scholars noted geometric patterns, spirals, circles, and lines that suggested a deep symbolic or ceremonial significance. Early researchers proposed several hypotheses, ranging from ritual uses and astronomical alignments to markers for trade routes or territorial boundaries. While there was no definitive evidence to confirm any single theory, it became clear that the Blythe intaglios were not mere decorations. They were meaningful creations, a form of storytelling etched into the earth itself. The rediscovery of the intaglios, however, also brought unintended consequences. As awareness of the site grew, so did human activity in the surrounding area. Tourists, curious sightseers, and off-road enthusiasts began visiting the site, often without understanding its cultural and historical importance. The fragile desert soil and carefully scraped lines were not built to withstand modern traffic. Vehicles left ruts, hikers trampled outlines, and cattle grazed on areas that had once been meticulously maintained. Slowly, the edges of some geoglyphs began to erode, and the risk of permanent damage became apparent. By the mid-20th century, the need for preservation was urgent. Recognizing the importance of the site, the state of California designated the Blythe intaglios as California Historical Landmark, ensuring legal recognition and basic protections. Federal authorities including the Bureau of Land Management, took further steps to secure the site, erecting fences, posting warning signs, and limiting direct access. Aerial photography became the primary method for studying the geoglyphs without causing harm, allowing researchers to document their condition, analyze patterns, and track erosion over time. One of the most significant preservation efforts came in the 1970s and 1980s, when archaeologists partnered with indigenous groups to study and protect the site. Tribal leaders emphasized that the intaglios were more than historical artifacts. They were sacred, part of a spiritual and cultural landscape that remained relevant to living communities. Collaborative efforts focused not only on physical preservation, but also on education, raising awareness about the geoglyphs' cultural significance and the need to respect the land. Despite these efforts, challenges persist. Natural erosion, flooding, and shifting sands continue to threaten the geoglyphs, while human activity, though regulated, remains a potential source of damage. Researchers have had to innovate, using modern technologies such as drones, satellite imagery, and 3D modeling to monitor the figures and create digital archives that can survive even if the physical forms continue to degrade. These technologies also allow scientists to analyze subtle features that might otherwise go unnoticed, such as patterns in soil composition, alignment with solar events, or traces of ritual activity surrounding the intaglios. Scientific studies of the Blythe intaglios have provided new insights into their construction and age. Radiocarbon dating of organic material found near the site suggests that some figures may date back 1,000 to 2,000 years, placing them within the late prehistoric period of the American Southwest. Comparative studies with other geoglyphs in the region indicate that the Blythe figures were part of a broader tradition of landscape art, practiced by multiple indigenous communities across the desert over centuries. These studies have helped archaeologists understand that the intaglios were not isolated experiments, but part of a cultural practice deeply connected to ritual, ceremony, and cosmology. Another fascinating discovery is the relationship between the intaglios and the natural landscape. Some figures are positioned near water sources, ancient trails, or natural elevations that provide partial vantage points. This suggests that the creators deliberately chose locations that enhanced the figure's visibility and spiritual significance. The placement may have also been tied to seasonal cycles, trade routes, or ceremonial events, though the exact connections remain a subject of ongoing research. Preservation efforts also involve extensive collaboration with indigenous communities. Tribal leaders provide insight into traditional stories, symbolism, and ceremonial practices, helping archaeologists interpret the figures in culturally informed ways. These collaborations ensure that preservation is not just about protecting physical forms, but also respecting the intangible heritage, the beliefs, traditions, and oral histories that give the geoglyphs their full meaning. In recent decades, awareness of the Blythe intaglios has grown beyond academic circles. Documentaries, books, and tourism initiatives have introduced the site to a broader audience, highlighting its uniqueness and importance. Yet this exposure has required careful management. Access is limited to guided tours or aerial observation points, ensuring that visitors can experience the site without causing harm. Educational programs emphasize the fragility of the intaglios and the ethical responsibility of visitors to honor and protect them. Despite all efforts, the Blythe intaglios remain vulnerable. Even minor disturbances, foot traffic, vehicle tracks, or unintentional erosion can irreversibly damage sections of the figures. Preservation is a continuous process, requiring monitoring, documentation, and ongoing collaboration between government agencies, archaeologists, and indigenous communities. The goal is not simply to maintain the geoglyphs as relics of the past, but to keep them alive,
as a part of cultural memory, accessible to future generations while still respecting their sacred significance. The story of rediscovery and preservation highlights a broader lesson about human interaction with ancient landscapes. Sites like the Blythe Intagulos are not just archaeological curiosities, they are living reminders of human ingenuity, creativity, and spirituality. Protecting them requires more than fences or regulations. It demands respect for the cultural values that gave rise to them, and a recognition that some of the world's greatest treasures cannot be understood in isolation from the people who created them. In summary, the modern history of the Blythe Intagulos is a tale of revelation and responsibility. From the initial shock of rediscovery in the 1930s, to decades of academic study, to ongoing preservation and education efforts, the Intagulos have captured human imagination and inspired both scientific inquiry and spiritual reflection. Yet they remain fragile, their survival dependent on careful stewardship, cultural understanding, and respect for the land. As we move into the next chapter, we will explore the enduring mysteries of the Blythe Intagulos, the unanswered questions, the competing theories about their meaning, and the ways in which these enormous desert figures continue to challenge our understanding of the ancient past. The Intagulos are more than history etched into the earth. They are a bridge between worlds, between time and space, between the ancient and the modern, calling on us to look closer, think deeper, and tread lightly. Theories, mysteries, and the ongoing quest to understand the Intagulos. Even after nearly a century of study, the Blythe Intagulos remain one of the most enigmatic archaeological sites in North America. Their immense scale, meticulous design, and remote location raise questions that challenge archaeologists, historians, and indigenous scholars alike. Why were they made? Who made them? And what messages were intended to be conveyed across the desert, visible only from the sky? In this final chapter, we explore the theories, debates, and enduring mysteries surrounding these extraordinary geoglyphs. One of the most enduring mysteries concerns the identity of the creators. While there is consensus that the Blythe Intagulos were crafted by indigenous peoples of the Colorado Desert region, pinpointing the exact culture or group is difficult. The Mojave and Quechan tribes have long-standing connections to the region, with rich oral traditions, ceremonial practices, and mythologies that align in some ways with the symbolism of the figures. For example, the largest human figure, sometimes called the Mastamho figure, bears a striking resemblance to descriptions of the creator deity Mastamho, revered by the Mojave people as the shaper of the earth and guide of human life. Yet some researchers caution against attributing the geoglyphs to a single tribe or culture. The area was Mastamho, was historically a crossroads of trade and migration. Over centuries, multiple groups may have contributed to or maintained the Intagulos, passing knowledge from generation to generation. The figures may therefore represent a collective cultural effort, a shared spiritual landscape, rather than the creation of a single community. Another mystery lies in the purpose of the Intagulos. Archaeologists have proposed several plausible explanations, each grounded in cultural, ceremonial, or practical reasoning, ceremonial and religious functions. Many researchers argue that the geoglyphs were primarily ceremonial. The human figures may have represented deities, ancestral spirits, or mythological beings, while the spirals and geometric shapes could have symbolized journeys, cycles, or cosmological principles. Ritual dances, initiation rites, or seasonal ceremonies may have taken place directly on or around the figures. In this interpretation, the Blythe Intagulos are not just art, they are sacred, active spiritual spaces. Pilgrimage and navigation markers. The Colorado Desert was historically crisscrossed by trade routes connecting communities along the river and beyond. The geoglyphs may have served as markers, guiding travelers or pilgrims to sacred or resource-rich locations. From this perspective, the Intagulos were functional as well as symbolic, blending practicality with ritual significance. Astronomical alignments. Some scholars have suggested that certain figures or hideaways are our ideas indisputable, and the crowd must feel the waves of our strength. Patterns may align with celestial events such as solstices or equinoxes. While evidence is not conclusive, the hypothesis reflects a broader pattern seen in ancient cultures worldwide, marking the cycles of the sun, moon, and stars in ways that connect the heavens to the earth. Communication with the divine. One of the most intriguing ideas is that the Blythe intaglios were created to be seen by sky beings, spirits, or deities. From ground level, the figures are only partially legible, but from above, or in the spiritual realm, they become complete. This theory aligns with indigenous worldviews that emphasize the importance of the unseen, the sacred, and the cosmic. In essence, the geoglyphs may have been offerings or messages intended for eyes that could see beyond human perception. Despite decades of research, no single explanation is universally accepted. Each theory offers insights, but also raises new questions. The ceremonial interpretation explains the spiritual and cultural significance, but cannot account for the precise scale and geometry. The navigational theory explains placement, but leaves symbolism largely unexplained. The astronomical hypothesis is compelling, but remains speculative. In many ways, the Blythe intaglios defy simple categorization, existing at the intersection of art, ritual, landscape, and mystery. The materials and methods used to create the intaglios provide additional clues. Scraping away the dark desert pavement to expose lighter soil required planning, manpower, and knowledge of geometric principles. The figure's precision implies careful measurement, alignment, and possibly the use of templates or stakes to maintain proportionality. In a pre-industrial society, this represents a remarkable technical achievement. The fact that the figures were maintained over time, enduring wind, rain, and desert erosion, further underscores their importance to the communities that created them. Modern technology has revolutionized the study of the Blythe intaglios. Aerial photography, satellite imagery, and drone surveys allow researchers to see the full scope of the figures without disturbing them. 3D scanning and digital mapping help track erosion and monitor preservation efforts. Even with these tools, many subtleties of the intaglios remain elusive. Soil composition, microtopography, and faint traces of past rituals continue to yield clues, slowly, like whispers from the past. Each discovery adds depth to our understanding, but also reminds us of how much remains unknown. Indigenous voices are central to contemporary interpretations. Tribal elders and cultural leaders provide context that purely scientific studies cannot. Oral histories, ritual knowledge, and traditional cosmologies enrich our understanding of the intaglios' spiritual and cultural significance. Collaboration between archaeologists and indigenous communities emphasizes that these geoglyphs are not just relics of the past, they are living heritage, imbued with meaning that continues into the present. Despite their fragility, the Blythe intaglios continue to captivate the imagination of scholars, artists, and the public. They are often compared to the Nazca lines of Peru, which also feature monumental figures visible primarily from the air. While there are differences in scale, style, and cultural context, the comparison highlights a universal human impulse to shape the landscape, to leave messages for the divine or the future, and to create art on a monumental, almost cosmic scale. The enduring fascination with the intaglios also reflects a broader human desire to connect with mystery. In a world increasingly dominated by technology and immediate information, the geoglyphs remind us that some knowledge is indirect, experiential, and interpretive. They challenge us to consider perspective, literally and figuratively, and to respect the ingenuity of those who came before us. The Blythe intaglios also serve as a cautionary tale about the vulnerability of cultural heritage. Erosion, tourism, and development threaten the survival of these ancient works, preservation requires vigilance, collaboration, and public awareness. It is a reminder that history is not static and that the survival of these treasures depends on the choices we make today. In the end, the Blythe intaglios are more than lines in the sand. They are monumental expressions of human creativity, spirituality, and connection to the land. They are messages from the past, encoded in soil and stone, inviting us to imagine the lives, beliefs, and rituals of people who walked these deserts long before us. Their scale inspires awe, their mystery sparks inquiry, and their endurance reminds us that even in harsh environments, human culture can leave a lasting mark. As we look to the future, the quest to understand the Blythe intaglios continues. Every new study, every aerial survey, and every conversation with indigenous knowledge holders brings us closer to insight, but complete understanding may always remain just out of reach. Perhaps that is fitting. After all, some of the most profound connections between humanity and the landscape are not fully explainable, existing in the spaces between sight, memory, and imagination. For those who stand on the edges of these desert giants, whether on foot or in the sky, the experience is unforgettable. The intaglios whisper across the sands, asking us to wonder, to respect, and to keep looking. They are ancient, enormous, and enigmatic, but above all, they are a testament to the enduring power of human creativity and the eternal dialogue between people and the land. The Blythe intaglios are not just a mystery to solve. They are a story to witness, a heritage to honor, and a symbol of the human desire to reach beyond ourselves, to communicate, to create, and to leave something that will endure for millennia. And perhaps, in the quiet desert, with the wind sweeping across the etched earth, they still speak to peace.